In the heart of a wind-burnt desert, a 12-year-old orphan was solving equations that Caltech researchers couldn't. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, flat and cracked under the weight of a sky too wide. Along Route 60, just past Socorro, New Mexico, stood a gas station that looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint since the moon landing. It wasn't on any tourist brochure, nor did it have clean bathrooms or iced coffee. But it had something else. A girl named Elisa. She was 12, slight and brown-eyed, with a frayed baseball cap too big for her head. Most folks thought she was just a quiet kid who pumped gas and wiped windshields. But if you looked closer, you'd notice the small black notebook she kept tucked into her back pocket. And if you looked even closer, you'd see what she wrote inside it. Tiny drawings of swirling arrows, equations scrawled in pencil, and sketches of cars with curves no manufacturer had yet imagined. Elisa had lived at the gas station ever since her mother passed 2 years ago. Her mother, Rosalia, was an undocumented mechanic from Chihuahua who'd worked at the station's auto shop until cancer took her before her time. Elisa never knew her father. After Rosalia died, no one came for the girl. The owner, a tired man named Bert, let her stay in the supply shed out back. He figured she was no trouble and worked harder than any adult he could hire. Most days passed in a loop of heat, dust, and silence. Customers came and went, few talking, fewer tipping. Elisa would fill tanks, check oil, and wipe windshields, her eyes always scanning the way the wind lifted sand in spirals across the pavement. In the evenings, she sat behind the station near the propane tanks, watching the sunset smudge the desert in pink and ochre. And she would write. Her notebook was filled with observations she couldn't name but somehow understood. She watched how the heat rose off the hoods of idling cars and how smoke twisted in patterns when the wind shifted. She traced the shape of dust as it curled around the curve of a fuel tank. In her mind, she saw invisible rivers of air flowing, splitting, rejoining. One day, a semi-truck pulled in, grumbling and wheezing like an old beast. It was battered, its paint faded, but what caught Elisa's eye was the way the hot air moved around its sides. As the truck idled, she walked slowly around it, crouched near the back wheel, and stared. She pulled out her notebook and began to draw. The vortex behind the truck's cab formed a pocket of turbulence, like a vacuum sucking back the exhaust. She noticed how the dust on the ground swirled behind the rear axle, always in the same direction. Something about it seemed wrong, or rather, unfinished. She sketched a teardrop shape behind the cab, wondering what would happen if the airflow could be smoothed out. Her pencil moved quickly now, forming curves and contours. A new shape for the back of the vehicle, more like the bodies of birds than trucks. That evening, a rare visitor returned. The man drove a 1980s Ford station wagon, seafoam green and dented. He was tall, with white eyebrows like cotton tufts, and hands that trembled slightly when he handed her a $10 bill. He didn't speak much the first time he came, but this time, as Elisa wiped his windshield, he squinted at her notebook sitting on the fuel pump. "You drawing cars, kid?" Elisa hesitated, then nodded. He leaned over, squinting at the page. His eyes widened. "That's a wake vortex," he murmured. "And is that your idea for a tail correction?" She stared at him. I watch how the wind moves. That's all." He chuckled, more to himself than her. "What's your name?" "Elisa." He held out his hand. "Walter Klein, used to teach fluid mechanics at Caltech." She blinked. She had seen the word Caltech once, on a magazine someone left behind. A place with white buildings and smart people. Walter asked to see more of her notebook. They sat on the low concrete edge of the pump island as the wind blew and the sun slipped westward. He turned page after page in silence. "Elisa," he said finally, this is real understanding. Most of my graduate students couldn't draw a streamline if their life depended on it." She frowned. "What's a streamline?" Walter smiled. He pulled a pen from his shirt pocket and drew a curve on the corner of her notebook. "A streamline is the path that a fluid particle follows. Like if the air was made of tiny marbles and you let one roll along the wind, that's the line it would trace." She nodded slowly. "So, like how the smoke bends?" "Exactly." Over the next weeks, Walter returned again and again. He brought her a thick, scorched copy of Fundamentals of Fluid Mechanics from his garage, pages singed at the corners from some long-ago fire. Together, they read beneath the shade of the propane tanks. He explained Bernoulli's principle using an old soda can and a straw. He told her about the Navier-Stokes equations, which described how fluids moved and how no one had solved them completely. "Why not?" Elisa asked. "Because they're hard," he said, "and the world rarely rewards the people who look at things no one else sees, until it needs them." Elisa understood that better than most. In this station, forgotten by maps and memory, she saw what wind did when no one watched. She saw what it whispered across hoods and fenders and the aluminum skin of trailers. She didn't know the equations, but she knew the behavior. And in her hands, that knowledge grew into sketches, models, ideas. One night, after the sun had dropped behind the distant hills and the sky had turned the color of old bruises, Elisa sat on the roof of the shed and looked out over the desert. She didn't know it yet, but someone would soon read the letter she'd write. Someone would open that notebook and realize that inside, a child had quietly redrawn the future of electric vehicle aerodynamics. But for now, all she knew was the wind. And it was speaking again. She picked up her pencil. Each morning in the desert began with the whisper of air across rusted metal and sand. The wind was never still here. It scraped, twisted, and rolled. It knew the slanted corners of the pump station roof and the dips in the cracked cement like it knew the grooves of its own palm. And Elisa knew the wind. She began waking earlier than usual. Just before dawn, she would climb to the flat rooftop of the supply shed with her notebook, a flashlight, and a roll of dental floss. From up there, the world looked like an ocean made of sand and heat. She tied threads of floss between the old antenna and a pipe, watching how they lifted and sagged with the morning breeze. Each twitch and flutter told her something. She began to name the shapes in the wind. There was the scarf, a ribbon of air that twisted once and dropped. The spiral flick, where gusts curved in on themselves like spiraled orange peels. She marked them all, not by formulae, but by pattern and memory. Still, slowly, she was trying to find the math behind them. In the afternoons, when customers slowed, she sat behind the propane tanks with Walter. Today, he brought an old hairdryer and a ping-pong ball. "We are going to see Bernoulli at work," he said, plugging the dryer into the outdoor socket. He turned it on and held the ball in the stream of air. The ball floated, wobbling but suspended. "The air moves faster over the curved top," he said, "which lowers the pressure. That keeps the ball aloft. Wings work the same way." Elisa nodded, her mind already connecting it to what she had seen around tanker trucks. She thought of the strange curl of dust behind trailers. "So the air sticks to the surface because the pressure drops?" Walter grinned. "That is called the Coanda effect. Fluids follow curved surfaces if they can, until they cannot." That night, Elisa took apart an old fan Bert had thrown out. She fixed the blades, cleaned the dust, and mounted it inside a long cardboard box. Then she used cotton strings, some incense from her mother's things, and built a wind tunnel. She tested toy cars, bits of cardboard she shaped into different tail ends. She blew air through the fan and watched the smoke trails. Her fingers smudged with soot and oil. She scribbled arrows and angles. She was trying to reduce the wake. If the tail end were shaped like a falling raindrop, she whispered, maybe the wake would collapse more gently. Walter saw the model the next morning and laughed with astonishment. You have made a primitive CFD setup. Computational fluid dynamics, Elisa. Except without a computer. She looked confused. He explained. Usually we use software to simulate airflow, but you are building the simulation with smoke and string. That day he showed her the drag equation. D equals 1/2 times rho times V squared times CD times A. That is drag force, the resistance. CD is the drag coefficient, the part you are trying to lower. She copied the formula carefully. Underneath, she drew a side view of her redesigned car. In the corner, she wrote, "Let the air go home gently." That weekend, Walter brought something more than a lesson. As the morning sun bled over the horizon, he parked his seafoam green Ford at Pump 2 and waved her over. In his arms, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag, was a thick textbook with corners blackened like over-roasted bread. "Fluid Mechanics, 5th edition," he said with reverence. "I taught from this copy for 20 years. It survived a fire in my garage. Like you, it's a survivor." Elisa accepted the book with both hands. The binding was split, the margins marked with decades of pencil notes, underlines, and question marks. "What's this one?" she asked, pointing to a boxed equation with the label Reynolds number. "That's how you know whether flow is smooth or chaotic," Walter said. "Laminar versus turbulent. It's one of the first things engineers check when we study fluid flow." She read aloud slowly. "Velocity times characteristic length divided by kinematic viscosity." He raised an eyebrow. "Not bad. You've got the rhythm of it." From then on, their afternoons became more intense. Walter set up cardboard tubes to teach her about boundary layers, the thin layer of slowed air that clings to surfaces. They boiled water in a kettle and used steam to visualize lift. They dropped pebbles into a kiddie pool to simulate wave interference. It was a university course in a desert junkyard. But amid the math and models, something else was growing. A trust, soft and unspoken. Elisa began telling him about her mother, how she would hum softly while tightening bolts, how her hands were always stained with oil, how she said that machines had moods and air had memory. One evening, Walter stood silently as Elisa drew out a car shape with streamlines tailing off the back like a comet. Her pencil didn't stop until it reached the edge of the paper. "You know," he said, "I once had a student try to design a shape like this. A wake-reducing tail. We ran simulations for weeks, but we couldn't solve the reattachment problem." "What problem?" Elisa asked. "When air flows off a surface, it separates. If it doesn't reattach cleanly, you get turbulence, like a car dragging a noisy cape behind it. But if you could guide the flow back gently, you'd cut drag significantly. Less resistance, more efficiency." "And no one solved it?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not in any affordable or manufacturable way. Until now, maybe." She didn't smile, but her eyes sparkled. In the growing dark, Walter reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I want you to write to Caltech," he said. "There's a research group working on electric vehicle aerodynamics. They're struggling with similar issues. Tell them your ideas. They won't read it. I'm just a gas station girl." He knelt beside her, voice firm. No, you're the wind's apprentice, and the wind has secrets worth sharing. She took the envelope. That night, with a stubby pencil and a flashlight balanced between her knees, Elisa wrote. She described her observations, her experiments, and the shapes she'd sketched. She enclosed 5 pages from her notebook, the cleanest ones, and wrote in careful, simple words what she thought could be done. She ended the letter with a sentence she had once heard her mother say. Air doesn't argue. It only goes where it is gently led. She sealed the letter and left it on the counter. Bert, noticing the address and the nervous glance in her eyes, said nothing. The next day he dropped it at the post office on his way to buy oil filters. Days passed. Then weeks. No answer. Elisa stopped bringing up the letter. She didn't mention Caltech or the tail correction or the names of engineers Walter had spoken of. But she still climbed to the roof each morning. She still watched the wind. One afternoon, as she sat behind the station, a car rolled in. Not a truck or a station wagon. Sleek. Silver. A brand new electric vehicle she'd never seen in person. Lucid Air. The man who stepped out wore a campus lanyard around his neck. He smiled. Hey, is this where I find the girl who draws wind? Elisa stood still. Her notebook was in her hand. I got your letter, he said. I'm from the Caltech lab. You had some thoughts on rear wake suppression? I'd like to ask you a few questions. Walter, standing nearby, didn't speak, but his eyes glistened. He stepped back and let the wind carry her forward. And Elisa, Wind's apprentice, stepped into the world that was beginning to open. The invitation came 3 days later. A formal letter on heavy paper with a gold seal from the California Institute of Technology. It was brief and polite, but filled Elisa's chest with something she had never known how to name. A quiet, growing hope. We would be honored if you joined us to present your aerodynamic proposal to the Caltech EV Research Group. It was signed by Dr. Harini Patel, lead investigator at the EV Aerodynamics Lab. Elisa read it 3 times, folded it carefully, and slipped it under her mattress. She didn't tell Bert. Not yet. That night, she couldn't sleep. She turned the fan on its lowest setting and lay beside it on the floor, feeling the air graze her cheeks. Her mind spun with worry. What if they laughed? What if she couldn't explain? She was a girl who fixed windshield wipers and swept up oil stains. She was not a scientist. But somewhere in that same night, the wind outside hummed in the slats of the walls, soft and steady. It didn't ask who she was. It just moved. The next morning, Walter sat waiting in his car, a travel mug steaming beside him. He'd already heard. They want you in Pasadena, he said, handing her a printed train ticket. Sleeper car. All the way from Socorro to L.A. She blinked. Who paid for this? He grinned. Someone with tenure and a dwindling pension. They left that evening. Bert waved them off with a carton of peanut butter crackers and a thermos. Walter drove her to the train station in Albuquerque, a quiet ride through open land and sunset. The train arrived just before dusk. As it pulled away, Elisa pressed her fingers to the window, watching the last of New Mexico fall into the dark. Pasadena was a different world. Trees with purple flowers lined the streets, and every building looked clean and white like a science fiction dream. Walter guided her through the campus gates like a man returning to a half-forgotten cathedral. Students buzzed past on bikes, equations scribbled on whiteboards in glass-walled labs. The EV lab was underground, a high-ceilinged room lined with fans, wind tunnels, and sleek black test vehicles. Dr. Patel met them at the door. She was young, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a voice that didn't condescend. "You must be Elisa. We've been waiting." In the center of the lab was a car body, unfinished, mounted on a rig. The tail section was taped in place, foam curves where the rear windshield would be. A line of airflow monitors dotted the floor around it. Elisa stared, heart pounding. "Would you like to walk us through your design?" Dr. Patel asked gently. Walter nudged her notebook into her hand. Elisa stepped forward. She pointed to the side profile. "The taper is based on a raindrop," she said quietly. "Except instead of trailing to a point, it flattens at the end to match the car's rear volume. That keeps the wake from shearing apart." She pointed to the diagram. "Here's the boundary layer. If we let it separate here, the air reattaches smoothly along a curved channel. I think it's called controlled detachment." The room fell silent. A few grad students scribbled notes. Dr. Patel stepped closer. Her brow furrowed, then lifted. "This is not just theoretical. This could work. Have you simulated it?" "No," Elisa said. "I don't have a computer." Dr. Patel smiled. "We do." Over the next 3 days, they ran simulations. Walter stayed at a nearby motel while Elisa moved from station to station inside the lab, watching swirling, color-coded airflow maps. The initial results showed a reduction in drag by 12%, but with slight modifications, adjusting the slope of the trailing edge, the number rose. 17%, one of the grad students gasped. "That's significant." Dr. Patel looked over at Elisa. "You may have just helped us leap 6 months ahead." But Elisa didn't beam. She turned to Walter and he only nodded, eyes shining. They gave her a tour of the wind tunnel, the real one. It looked like a giant silver cannon with transparent walls and overhead sensors. They placed a scale model of the EV with her tail design inside, then filled the tunnel with colored smoke. As the fan roared to life, the smoke curled around the car in steady lines. At the back, the air curved gently away, the wake narrower, cleaner. "Controlled detachment," Dr. Patel whispered. "You named it right." On her final day, Elisa gave a short presentation to the faculty. She stood behind a podium too tall for her and used a pointer longer than her arm, but her voice didn't shake. "Air does not like sudden changes," she told them. "It wants to stay close. We just need to shape the path." The room applauded. Afterward, in the courtyard, Dr. Patel handed her a folder. "We'd like to enroll you in the Caltech Summer Scholars Program for gifted youth. Full tuition, room and board, starting next June." Elisa opened the folder. Inside was a schedule, a campus map, and a form with her name printed at the top. Below it, someone had typed, "Predicted major, aeronautical engineering." "You don't have to answer now," Dr. Patel said, "but we hope you'll join us." Walter placed a hand on her shoulder. She said nothing, but her fingers gripped the folder like it was something alive. That night on the train ride back through Arizona, Elisa sat by the window and watched the clouds tumble over desert rock. Her head leaned against Walter's coat. He had fallen asleep beside her, his breath steady. In her lap was the notebook. She opened to a blank page. On it, she drew the EV again, but this time, from above, wind curling in even ribbons along its spine. At the bottom she wrote, "Don't fight the air, teach it where to go." The desert wind would be waiting. So would the shed, and the floss, and the dented old fans. But now she had seen where her ideas could lead. And she would return. Not because she was done learning, but because she had more to give. When Elisa returned to the gas station, the desert seemed both smaller and more sacred. She stepped out of Bert's old truck, her bag slung over one shoulder, her notebook under her arm. The heat was still the same, dry, humming, full of secrets. But something in her had changed. Bert met her with a quiet nod. There was no fanfare, no questions. Just a plate of tamales and a folded blanket left neatly in the shed. Walter had lingered in Pasadena for a few days longer, catching up with old colleagues. Elisa was back alone, but she wasn't lonely. She went straight to work rebuilding her wind tunnel. This time she reinforced the cardboard with duct tape. She found a spare window fan behind the tool shed and rewired it with help from a YouTube video she watched at the public library. She added incense sticks and fluorescent string, taping the lines vertically inside the tunnel. They danced with the air like silent music. Each trial she ran, she recorded in her notebook. Entry number, model shape, wind speed, turbulence reading. She didn't guess anymore. She tested. She tested a sloped-back truck cabin, a van with a belly pan, a compact car with a ducktail. She observed how small tweaks, a half-inch angle shift, a vent in the rear panel, created smoother wakes. It was the Coanda effect, again and again. The desert had become her wind tunnel. The kids started showing up around week 2. At first it was just Diego, the boy who lived 3 trailers down. He came by for a bottle of cold soda, then lingered, watching the smoke curl inside her tunnel. "What's that?" he asked. "Air," Elisa said. "Watching it behave." He blinked. "Air behaves?" "All the time," she said. "It just doesn't like being watched." The next day he brought his sister, Lucia. Then 3 more came. Cousins, neighbors, a friend from school. Soon, every afternoon after the sun dipped just enough to not burn skin, 5 or 6 kids sat around Elisa's makeshift lab. She handed out pencils and graph paper. "Today, we're going to design a shape that the wind likes." They laughed at first, but then began sketching. Some drew rockets. One drew a potato. Another drew a bird. Elisa treated each seriously. She held their drawings to the light, asked questions. "Why this curve? What do you think happens to the wind here?" One afternoon, she carved out a new tunnel using 2 plastic storage bins and borrowed a leaf blower from Bert. The results were louder, but spectacular. The wind channeled better, and the airflow strings stayed tight. Walter returned with a box of books and a smile. "You opened a school while I was gone," he said. "Not a school," Elisa said. "Just people who are curious. That's how most schools should start." That evening, after the kids went home, Walter sat beside her and pulled out a worn notebook of his own. He showed her sketches from the 70s, test vehicles, nose cones, intake ducts. "I spent years chasing airflow, trying to master it. And then you, a kid, come along and treat it like a friend instead of a problem." Elisa didn't say anything. He looked out toward the highway. "Do you think you'll go? To Caltech?" She was quiet for a long time. "It's beautiful there. The labs, the ideas. But they don't need me yet. Not as much as these kids do." Walter nodded slowly. "You don't have to choose forever. Just choose for now." That night, Elisa wrote a letter, not to Caltech, but to Dr. Patel. She thanked her for the invitation. She asked for more material, books, online lectures, practice problems. She asked if she could send updates on her experiments. The reply came within a week. "Dear Elisa, we respect your choice. Your work continues to inspire us. We will send all the materials you requested and more. Please consider our doors always open." Warmly, Dr. Harini Patel Elisa folded the letter carefully and pinned it on the wall beside her workbench. Weeks passed. The station stayed quiet, the highway never loud. More kids came. A few grown-ups, too. A retired teacher, a mother of 3, even Bert sat in once. Elisa began planning weekly sessions, one on Bernoulli, one on drag coefficients, one on the Reynolds number. She explained it with water bottles and food dye. The desert, the station, and her wind tunnels became her classroom. And though she didn't have a degree, or a lab coat, or a title, the air moved for her just the same. The desert summer came in slow waves. Dry light, long shadows, and stillness that held your breath for you. But for Elisa, it was a season of motion. Letters began to arrive weekly from Pasadena, each one stamped with the Caltech seal. Inside, lecture notes, diagrams, data sets, and handwritten comments from Dr. Patel. Sometimes there were notes from students, too, a question about one of Elisa's sketches, or a thank you for a concept she had helped clarify. They called her the Desert Engineer. Elisa set up a small shelf in the shed for the packets. She cataloged them by subject: flow separation, wake interference, transition from laminar to turbulent. With each new envelope, her wind tunnels grew more refined. Her students grew too. Diego was building his own wind tunnel from shoeboxes and hair dryers. Lucia had started mapping wind directions with a hand-drawn compass rose. More kids came. They brought folding chairs. Someone donated a whiteboard. It started to look like a school. And yet, as everything grew, Walter became smaller. He moved more slowly. His hands, once steady even when rebuilding a carburetor, now trembled when lifting a mug. Elisa noticed the shortness of breath, the way he leaned on the station railing just a bit longer each time. She didn't ask. He didn't offer. Instead, they worked. He helped her build a rotating rig for testing car models at different yaw angles. They talked about the Magnus effect and pressure differentials and the future of long-haul electric trucks. But each afternoon, Walter would pause more often, rub his chest gently, then resume as if nothing had changed. One morning, Elisa arrived to find him already seated behind the station, a blanket around his shoulders. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "The wind was talking last night." "What did it say?" He smiled. "That it's almost time." She sat beside him. "You should go back to Caltech," he said quietly. "Take the next step. Let them sharpen you, teach you. I've given you all I know." "I don't want to go without you," she said. He turned to her, eyes soft. "Then go with me. Just carry what I carry." The next day, he collapsed near Pump 3. Bert called the ambulance. The kids sat in stunned silence. Elisa didn't speak for hours. Walter was taken to the nearest hospital, 40 miles away. She visited the next morning. He was asleep, tubes in his arms. The nurse handed her a package. "He asked to give you this." It was his old fire-scarred fluid mechanics book, the one he had taught from, with a small envelope inside. Inside, one line written in his slanted script: "Keep the flow steady. When it separates, curve gently." He passed that night. No family, no services. The station went quiet. Elisa held his book for hours. Then she returned to her tunnel. She taught the next session without missing a step. She quoted Walter when explaining boundary layers. She pointed to the trailing edge of a child's drawing and said, "Let the air go home gently." The kids didn't cry, but they listened harder. Later that month, Dr. Patel sent a new letter. Enclosed was an official invitation. Caltech Summer Scholars Program, Engineering Cohort, Early Admission. With it came a note: "When you're ready, the lab will be waiting, and Walter's name will be etched on the model you helped us build." Elisa stared at the words for a long time. Then she picked up her pencil, turned to a fresh page, and drew the tail of a truck tapering into the wind, and beneath it she wrote, "Air doesn't mourn, it continues, but it never forgets where it flowed." The sun had barely cleared the ridge when the station phone rang. Bert answered with his usual grunt, then looked out toward the shed. "Elisa, it's for you." She wiped her hands on a rag and stepped inside the store. The voice on the line was warm and familiar. Elisa, this is Dr. Patel. I know this is sudden, but we'd like you to return to Caltech next week. We're building a full-scale prototype, and we need your design expertise on site. Elisa's breath caught. We've secured a scholarship for your travel and housing. You'll be staying near campus. There's a team ready to work with you. We want your hands on this. She looked down at her palms, calloused, scratched, still streaked from yesterday's tuning of Bert's pickup. All right, she said. I'll come. That evening, the kids gathered for their weekly session. Elisa stood before them, notebook in hand. I'll be gone for a while, she said. But I'm leaving you something. She walked to the whiteboard and wrote 3 simple rules. 1. Ask the wind where it wants to go. 2. Build with kindness. Curves, not corners. 3. Share what you learn. Then she passed out blank notebooks to each child. On the cover of each was a tiny sketch, a feathered arrow, like a stream of air. When the day came, Bert drove her to the train station. He didn't say much, just handed her a sandwich and a coffee. Be good to them brainiacs, he said. Show 'em desert wind. At Caltech, the lab had changed. The model Elisa helped design now stood in the center of a full bay, a long-bodied EV with smoothed panels and a rear tail section gently tapering into a narrow wake zone. Sensors lined its surface. A temporary nameplate read, E-Trail, Prototype 03. Dr. Patel greeted her with a smile. We kept the tail exactly as you drew it. Elisa walked around the car, fingertips grazing the foam molds and aluminum plates. It felt like touching a memory made solid. Over the next days, she joined testing runs. Engineers asked her questions, jotted her answers. At night, she stayed in a dorm room with her own desk and lamp. The campus buzzed with late-night coding, whiteboards scribbled with equations she now understood. One night, after a long wind tunnel test, Dr. Patel brought her to a quiet room at the end of the lab. Inside, on a stand, was a finished model, quarter scale, polished, with markings around its edges. We wanted to show you something, she said. She turned the base. Etched beneath the tail were the words, for Walter Klein, who taught her how air remembers. Elisa felt her throat tighten. Her hand rested on the model's edge. We plan to present this next month at the International Vehicle Design Conference, Dr. Patel said, and I'd like you to be our speaker. Elisa blinked. Me? You? You've already taught more students than most professors I know. Just speak from that place. She nodded slowly. Later that night, Elisa sat in her dorm, staring out the window at the dark curve of the San Gabriel Mountains. She opened her notebook, drew the model again, labeled the airflow lines, annotated new adjustments for high-speed turns. Then she wrote at the bottom, "We do not push air. We invite it, and it listens to those who pay attention." The desert would still be there. But now the wind carried her forward. The day of the conference arrived with a gray sky and a light breeze that Elisa swore carried the scent of dust. Desert dust. Pasadena's convention center buzzed with engineers, designers, journalists, and industry veterans in polished shoes. Banners hung from high ceilings. International Vehicle Design Conference 2025. Elisa stood backstage, a small microphone taped to her cheek, her notebook in her hands. Dr. Patel adjusted her collar. You've got this, she said. Elisa gave a small nod. Her stomach trembled, but her hands were still. Her drawings were in the presentation slides. Her name was on the program. She was the final speaker in a panel of 11, and the only one under 15. As the speaker before her wrapped up a complex segment on active aerodynamic flaps, the host turned toward her with a smile. And now, from New Mexico, please welcome Elisa Reyes. She stepped into the light. The auditorium was larger than any classroom she'd ever seen. Hundreds of eyes, dozens of notepads, cameras, but all she focused on were her slides. "Good afternoon," she began. "I come from a gas station. We don't have wind tunnels, but we do have wind." A chuckle from the front row. She clicked to the first diagram. "This is the rear wake of a standard EV truck, what we call turbulent separation. I saw it first behind a semi on Route 60. Dust patterns told me what the air was doing." She moved through her points: streamline tapering, reattachment points, passive airflow channels, each term paired with a drawing from her notebook. No jargon, no ego, just clear, gentle explanation. The final slide showed the full-scale E-Trail prototype in the Caltech lab. "We can't stop the wind," she said, "but we can listen. And when we listen, we shape the future." Silence. Then, applause. First scattered, then rising. Engineers leaned forward. Students stood. The host smiled wide. Afterward, a line formed at the edge of the stage. Professors, designers, a representative from a European EV startup. They all wanted to speak with her, ask questions, offer scholarships, request copies of her notes. But Elisa noticed one figure at the back, an older man in a tan jacket, leaning on a cane. He looked familiar. She made her way through the crowd. "Walter?" she whispered. The man smiled. "Not quite. Name's Henry Klein. Walter was my brother." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a letter. "He wrote this a month before he passed. Didn't know where to send it. I figured you'd find your way somewhere big." She unfolded the note. Inside, in Walter's handwriting, "If she ever speaks to a crowd, tell her I saw it first. And tell her—" She made the air quieter. She pressed the note to her chest. Later that night, alone in her dorm, Elisa looked out the window again. The mountains rested quietly in the moonlight. She opened her notebook, drew a curve that faded into stillness, a line with no turbulence. Then beneath it wrote, "Still air doesn't mean silence. Sometimes it means you shaped it right." She paused, then kept writing. Her thoughts unspooled like wind along a soft ridge. "When I was 9, I thought wind was something bad. It made the doors creak. It kicked sand into your eyes. It howled. Now I know. It only howls when it's not understood." She turned the page. "Today they asked for copies of my models. But I think the real model is this. A child watching dust behind a truck. A notebook. An old man who never gave up teaching. A wind that wouldn't stop talking. More than anything, I wanted to tell the audience it's not the lab or the slides or the machines. It's the waiting. It's the silence before something makes sense. It's looking at chaos and saying, 'I think I know why you're moving.'" She closed the notebook. Her hand rested gently on the cover. The applause still echoed in her memory, but softer now. Not a roar. A breeze. She looked again at Walter's letter, folded it once more, placed it in the back pocket of her book, beside a page marked, "To Teach." In the hallway outside, someone knocked. It was Dr. Patel holding a small envelope. "One last thing," she said. "They want to put your name on the next prototype. The full vehicle, not just the tail." Elisa opened it. Inside, a design draft. At the base of the aerodynamic panel, etched in silver, "Design Advisor, E. Reyes, Caltech Research Fellow, Youth Division." She didn't cry. Not then. Not until she was back at her desk, hands folded, breathing deep. Still air, no turbulence, only forward. The desert met her with silence. After the applause faded, after the cameras turned away and the notebooks closed, Elisa Reyes stepped down from the world of polished labs and satin banners and returned home. Not to retreat, but to rebuild. The train ride from Pasadena to New Mexico was long and quiet, the kind that let thoughts grow full-sized. Elisa sat by the window, sketching in her notebook. Not cars, not airflow, not equations, just the lines of the land she missed, the flat stretch of horizon, the jagged outline of brush, and in one corner, a boy flying a kite made from trash bags and twine. She smiled. When she arrived, Bert was waiting at the platform with his pickup truck and a lukewarm soda. "You're taller," he said. "I learned about pressure coefficients," she said. He grinned. "Same thing." The gas station looked smaller, though it hadn't changed. Same faded Coca-Cola sign. Same rusted pumps. But now it felt like a miniature version of something sacred. Elisa walked to the back of the supply shed, where her tunnel still stood. The wind had frayed the string. The fan's blades had warped. She ran her fingers over the edges. Then she heard them. Voices. Behind the station, in the shade of the cinder-block wall, sat 5 kids on upturned milk crates. Diego had grown taller. Lucia wore glasses now. New faces, too. A girl with freckles, a boy with a cowboy hat. "We kept it going," Diego said. Lucia held up a notebook, identical to the ones Elisa had once passed out. "We built new tunnels. We tested bottle shapes, skateboard helmets, even the curve of soda cans. We wrote it all down." Elisa sat with them, listened, then taught. It wasn't a lesson, more like a reunion with the air. Over the weeks that followed, something unexpected began to happen. People came, not just kids. A retired machinist from Albuquerque drove in twice a week. A science teacher from Las Cruces asked if she could volunteer. A man in a button-up shirt from a university in Arizona offered to fund new equipment. Bert muttered that the bathroom lines were getting too long. So Elisa started scheduling. Tuesdays, theory. Wednesdays, model building. Saturdays, testing and wind watching. She drafted a curriculum called Air Asks Questions. It wasn't formal, but it was careful. Each unit built from observation to design to explanation. Every kid got a notebook, every adult too, and each lesson ended with a question scribbled on the board. What is the wind trying to tell you today? By late summer, Caltech shipped her a new set of equipment, lightweight tunnel kits, model templates, measuring sensors. Along with it came a note from Dr. Patel. "Still following your trail. Your wake is strong but smooth." One morning, as she sat rechecking airflow notes, a black car pulled up. A man stepped out wearing a government badge and sunglasses. Behind him, a tall woman with a quiet voice. "We're with the Department of Energy," the woman said. "We've been following the E-Trail project. We're looking at educational outreach in rural areas. And we're also engineers." They watched the wind tunnel, talked to the kids, then to Elisa. "You know, the country needs more thinkers like you, ones who understand systems and silence, who teach not for noise, but for clarity. We want to partner." Elisa nodded slowly, then smiled. Later, she sat alone near the back of the station. The air was still, not dead, but steady. She opened her notebook and turned to a blank page. Draft for new lesson. Title, The Desert Lab. Objective, teach students how observation leads to theory. Materials, empty field. One windy afternoon. A child who's willing to wait. She paused, then wrote, "We don't teach answers. We shape questions. The wind responds to those who watch with care." The sun sank lower. From behind the horizon, clouds began to rise. Just a few, just enough. And Elisa, the girl who once traced air with her fingers and smoke, now watched as a new generation leaned forward, notebooks open, waiting. And the wind, true to its promise, spoke. Fall came slow to the desert. The winds cooled, the air crisped just slightly, and the sky stretched wider than before. like a breath held all summer was finally being let go. By then, Elisa's shed had become more than a classroom. It was a gathering place, a testing site, a whispering archive of all that wind could teach. Each morning, she woke before the sun, made tea on a hot plate, and read notes sent from labs in Germany, India, and across the U.S. Researchers who had seen her conference talk were sending papers, simulations, even field data. Some wanted feedback. Some just wanted to thank her. "And always," she replied, in clear, careful letters, sometimes typed, sometimes written in her looping cursive with a sharp pencil. She also began recording her lessons. Bert had found a dusty camcorder in the storage room and gave it to her with a shrug. She propped it on a milk crate and recorded herself teaching boundary layer flow using a plastic bottle and incense. You don't need computers to see the wind, just patience and a way to pay attention. Within weeks, her videos began to spread. Teachers shared them. A university in Montana asked if they could translate them into Lakota. A group of retired pilots started meeting weekly to discuss them. Even Caltech requested to archive them officially. But even with the attention, Elisa kept her days simple. She fixed cars when needed, helped Bert stock soda cans, and always returned to the tunnel. One evening, just as the light turned gold and long shadows slid across the pavement, Diego ran to her with wide eyes. "There's a bus," he gasped, "coming here, full of kids, from Albuquerque." Elisa stood, wiped her hands on her jeans, and walked toward the road. Dust curled behind the slow approach of a yellow school bus. When it stopped, 23 students stepped out, followed by 3 teachers and a principal. They carried notebooks. "We want to learn from the girl who listens to the wind," the principal said. That evening, Elisa stood at the whiteboard, now nailed to the station's west wall. 23 new students sat cross-legged in the dirt. She held up a feather. "This is how we start." She tossed it lightly. The wind caught it, carried it across the lot, twirling. Every head turned to follow. Now let's find out why. As the sun dipped, Bert brought out sandwiches. The wind softened. The air settled around them, warm and easy. Weeks passed. Then months. A local paper ran a story. The desert girl who changed aerodynamics. Then came a documentary crew. Then an offer from a foundation to build a small wind science center beside the station. Elisa agreed, but on one condition. It must stay open air. The wind must flow through it. Construction began that winter. Simple beams, soft canvas walls, a circular testing ring with solar-powered fans, a library shelf beneath a tin awning. On the highest wall, Elisa painted a line from her notebook. "We don't shape the wind. We shape what welcomes it." And still, she taught. She taught children, retirees, truckers on lunch breaks, scientists visiting from afar. Her methods were the same. Build it, test it, ask it gently. On the anniversary of Walter's passing, she held a night class. They lit candles, played a tape of him explaining the Bernoulli principle with a soda can. Everyone listened. Then Elisa stood, held up a copy of his scorched book, and opened to the first page. "He didn't finish this page," she said. "So we will." That year, a new model EV was unveiled by a major automaker. Its tail was sleek, tapered, and strikingly familiar. At the press release, a spokesperson mentioned her name. "A 12-year-old desert girl helped us listen better." She was 13 now, her hands steadier, her eyes brighter. In late spring, she returned briefly to Pasadena. Caltech held a ceremony. They gave her a medal, a lab coat, and a key. to her own study space on campus. But she came back, as she always did, because the wind had a job for her. It asked her to stay, to teach, to trace, to listen. One quiet morning, she stood alone before her wind tunnel. No visitors yet, just her and the slow murmur of a desert breeze. She turned the fan on low, lit a stick of incense, watched the line of smoke rise, then curve. She smiled. The air, once restless, now moved like memory, clean, quiet, and full of knowing. And somewhere between the shadows of theory and the edge of hope, a girl with a notebook had taught the world how to listen. To those of you who journeyed with Elisa from the cracked pavement of a desert gas station to the quiet halls of Caltech and back, thank you. This story is not just fiction. It is a mirror held up to the quiet brilliance found in forgotten corners of our world. I wrote it for the overlooked child with a question they're too shy to ask, for the retired teacher who still imagines, for the mechanic who sees beauty in motion, for anyone who ever listened closely and heard wisdom in the wind. Elisa's story is proof. Genius does not come dressed in lab coats. Sometimes it wears dust-covered jeans, watches smoke, and writes in the margins of gas receipts. If this story moved you, please share it with a grandchild, with a student, with someone who has stopped believing they can still learn. The world is full of wind. We just need more people who pay attention. With gratitude and warmth to all of you who watched, listened, and felt, thank you for being part of Elisa's journey. You gave your time to a quiet girl in a quiet place, and maybe in some small way, you heard the wind too. Until the next story finds you, stay curious, stay kind, stay listening.